When you create an instance of a class, you typically call its constructor method. In this code, in the project constructors, I'm calling the constructor method 3 times, creating 3 instances of the olive class. But my olive class doesn't have an explicit constructor method declaration. That's because of a specific compiler rule. If a Java class doesn't have an explicit constructor, the compiler creates a no-arguments constructor for you. But the other part of the rule is that if you have a constructor that does receive arguments, then a no-arguments constructor won't be generated for you. If you want it, you have to explicitly declare it. You can have as many constructor methods as you want, as long as their signatures, that is, their data types or the number of their arguments, differ from each other. So I'll make some changes to my olive class. I'll start here, right after my declarations of the instance variables or fields. A constructor method starts with the public access modifier. Then you don't need a return value, and the name of the constructor method always matches the name of the class. So this is my no-arguments constructor. Notice I'm declaring it all in one line, because I'm not going to have it actually do anything. It's just there to satisfy the compiler's rules. Next, I'll declare a constructor that accepts 3 arguments, 1 for each of the instance variables. Once again, the name of the method is olive, but this time the 3 arguments will match the data types and the names of these variables. And I'll just copy and paste them into place. That's the first variable and argument, name, and then color, and then oil. Now, when this constructor method is called, I'll take the values that are being passed in, and I'll save those values persistently in the instance variables. To distinguish between the argument names and the instance variable names, I'll start the instance variable names with the prefix this, meaning the variable that's a member of the current instance of the class. So this.name equals the argument name, and this.color equals the argument color, and this.oil equals the argument oil. So those are my constructor methods. Now I'll come back to the main class, and I'll modify the way I'm constructing the objects. For the first olive class, I'll pass in columata, and my next value is long, and that'll be that dark purple I used before, 02E 0854, and the final value is the amount of oil that this olive will yield. Now I'll make a copy of this, and I'll overwrite my other assignments, and I'll change the variable name so it's all consistent. But this olive will have a name of Ligurian, another olive varietal, and it'll have a color of black. That's 0x and then 6 zeros. And I'll say that that's a pretty small olive. It only yields 2 units of oil. Now at this point, I no longer need the calls to the setOil method. I'm setting those values as I create the objects, the instances of the oil class. So I'm adding 2 columata olives and 1 Ligurian. I'll check my problems view and make sure I don't have any syntax errors, and then I'll test the code. And there's the result. I have 2 calomatas and 1 Ligurian and a total olive oil yield of 8 units. But now I'm going to clean up my code a little bit and make it a little bit easier to read. For each olive object, instead of creating the object on one line and then passing it in on the next, I'll combine the two into a single statement. I'll take this constructor method call, and I'll cut it to the clipboard, and I'll paste it here. And now I no longer need that line of code. I'll duplicate that line of code and delete these, and then I'll do the same cut and paste operation to pass the new olive object into the olives array list without having to assign another reference variable. Now, I haven't reduced the number of objects that I'm creating. I've only reduced the number of reference variables that are pointing to them, but it's cleaned up my code quite a bit. And I'll run the code again, and I see exactly the same output. But now I can duplicate these lines of code, so now I have 4 Ligurians and 2 calamatas, and I can run the code, and I get a whole bunch more oil. And again, all of the processing of the oil is all in the olive press class.